Hi guys, welcome to the latest podcast of YarninBlak. Today I've got a great friend of mine on, Candice. I'll introduce you to her in a second, but first I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm calling you in from. I'm here in Baldwin Q on the land of the Wurundjeri people. I'd like to pay respect to their elders past and present. I'd like to acknowledge the young people that are coming through because they're going to be our future leaders and warriors that are going to take us into the future, and any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person that's with us today. But I have to introduce you to my guest. My guest is Candice, and I'm just going to throw straight over to her to go, hey, Candice, how are you? Who are you? Where you're from?
Okay, thanks, AJ. So I'm Candice Joy, and I'm currently on the Wilman-Tchen Budja, which is in WA in Collie. I'm a Menang Noongar woman, so I'm originally from the Albany area. At this current time, I am a facilitator of Aboriginal mental health first aid. I also have created and facilitated some of my own workshops based around my lived experience. And I'm loving it. That's where I'm at right now.
Cool. Now, how long have you been a mental health first aid instructor for?
So I have been just over 2 years now.
Oh,
2
wow.
years. Yeah.
Yeah.
It went pretty quick. Just a baby, really, compared to you.
Oh, okay. So what do you like about the course? What do you really like about the facilitation and getting that knowledge out there to mob?
Oh, look, I love empowering people, and I think the right facilitator, you can deliver the course content, but if you put your own spin on it, there's a real way for teaching people around, like, something I like to talk about is our survival brain and our thinking brain a lot, which is breaking things down, psychological terms and neuroscience and all this kind of stuff, which, I don't have a degree in any of those, but because of my own healing, I have educated myself a lot. And being able to just break down those kind of ideas and concepts to people, especially mob, in a way that they can understand, and not only look at how we can support other people, but I always say to any participants when they come in, if we as an individual can do our own healing and look at what we're doing for ourselves, then it's like a ripple effect. It's like that little rock in the pond. It can be negative or it can be positive, how it impacts everybody else. What we do for ourselves is so important.
Yeah. Now, you talked a bit about lived experience. What lived experience do you have that you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, it might be like shorter segment if I shared the lived experience I haven't had.
Look, you can always come back people come back for more part 2 to my segments as well. So you're always welcome back. We don't get through it all.
We'll have to do a voting system. If you want me back, just vote.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do I start? So look, my mum, she is a Noongar woman, and she at the time was only 16 years old when she had me. And basically I was raised by 2 non-Indigenous people who had that idea that they were kind of doing a favour of taking this Aboriginal child from their mob and raising them and educating them and all those kind of things. And it first started as like a supportive situation, I guess, but because mum was only young and didn't have much of a voice, she felt very pushed out and became quite absent. By the time I was 3 years old, she wasn't around a lot and she was dabbling in a lot of drink and things like that. And so they ended up taking it all through the court system, and I was actually removed permanently. And then probably about a year after that, my brother, he was born in 1983. I was born in 1980, and he was also removed permanently. So my brother and I, we were both raised by people who weren't mob. They were non-Aboriginal people. And look, when I talk about this stuff, it's not about pointing fingers or blame or anything. No. It's just about speaking my truth, because I've done a lot of healing, and there's a lot of forgiveness, and there's a lot of good things that these people taught us, and so we had a lot.
Did you grow up with your brother?
Yes, I did. Yes. Yeah. And my brother actually still is still with the family. Like the 2 people that raised us, they passed away quite some time ago now, but he's still in Albany and lives with the family very happily. He's got his own business and stuff. And he didn't go down the path that I did. But anyway, we'll get to that bit. So, there was a lot of things where we lived in the same town as mum and we didn't see her. you know, and things like that. And we were given this idea. There was a lot of stigma around, you know, the idea that Aboriginal people, they were uneducated, they didn't have jobs, you know, all this negative kind of stuff that we were raised with. And so we just didn't understand, you know, and it was shame. And we'd have like other Noongar kids come up to us in school and be like, "Hey, you're our cousin," and we'd be like, "What? No, you're not." You know, and that kind of, it was so confusing, you know. And so we'd only get to see mum on occasion. And then my little sister was born in 1986, and you know, that was another complexity to the situation too. But I ended up, you know, my way of coping with all of this, AJ, was through drugs and alcohol, and I was very angry for a really long time. So from the age of about 12 until through I was 40, I'm now 45 and a half. You know, it was drugs, it was prison, there was family violence. My kids, I've got 4 kids. One of them was removed from my care when she was 2 as a result of my addiction. You know, I'd Hep C for 17 years. You know, there was so much, all the things that go on in a person's lifestyle when they're an active addict.
Yeah.
I kind of lived them, you know. And so 3 of my children, they were born dependent and addicted to opioids as well. I was on the methadone program for 18 and a half years. And yeah, and then I started to make these huge changes probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And here we are. So, you know, that was a short
summary, short version. Yeah.
Like of what the lived experience and where it comes from.
Yeah. And you say that you run programs that where you talk about your lived experience. How do you do that in a safe way that keeps you safe?
Oh, look, I think so. A lot of my healing, I had to really dig deep. So everything that I talk about in my workshops, I think people love it so much because I've lived every part of it, including the healing. And I always try and keep it positive. You know, I try and keep it uplifted. I put a lot of humor in there as well. We have a lot of good laughs with people, you know, but at the same time, people are sharing, but I try to do it in a way that's not re-traumatizing them or me. But I've done so much healing on myself that, you know, I'll step into these spaces and first and foremost, we've just discussed, like I'm a Reiki healer. So I use a lot of that, a lot of grounding techniques and this kind of stuff. But also, I don't know, I just feel like it's such a blessing to do what I do. And I just don't dip into that negative. It doesn't come anymore. There's none of that anymore where I'm like, you know, but I have moments where I connect with people and I have empathy, but I don't sit in that stuff. So it's quite easy for me to do that.
Yeah. Now, growing up, I don't want to re-traumatize you, but growing up, how much Aboriginal studies did you learn at school at the time?
Is this a trick question? Oh, nothing at all. No.
Yeah.
We had what they call AIOUs. We had Aboriginal education officers when I got to high school, but I didn't last at high school very long. And she happened to be my mum's older sister. But yeah, there was none of that at all.
So you've got kids now. So when they were going through school, have you noticed that Aboriginal issues are being taught more or less or better or?
I think in some places, yes. Like I hear a lot about, you know, they're talking about our history, you know, which I'm a firm believer, you know, that should definitely be spoken about, like most of us are. I know, like here where I'm in Collie, my son has a Noongar language teacher that comes up there. But the interesting thing that I did have a conversation with them about is the fact that, you know, just because we're Noongars, like there's so many different mobs and language groups and all of our different storylines that I think sometimes it's forgotten that just because up here in Collie and only a few hours down in Albany where I'm from, like we say things and, you know, we speak and we name things very differently, maybe similar but different. So it's interesting to watch all of that play out. But in answer to your question, little improvements.
Yeah. And I will say, that's a question I ask every guest. And I think we're still now in 2026 and the majority of us over 40 are saying the same thing, that we never got much, but there's still, it's still increasing only a little bit.
Yes. Yep.
Not a
So
lot of
true.
bit, but a
Not a
little
lot of
bit.
it. Not a lot of it. And you hear little stories that are positive about, you know, like our school, you know, we're doing this and that. But yeah, it's, look, there's a school here, I don't want to call any schools out, but it's a private school.
Yeah.
And I noticed that like the mob here have said they put up a native garden, which is lovely with all the bush foods and stuff in, but they spelt like budger wrong.
Oh,
Like, so it's like, well, who did they consult doing that? You know, so there's still those little things, I think, where there's, you know, people have good intentions, but it's
yeah.
not quite hitting the mark either, you know, which makes it difficult
Yeah.
sometimes.
Now, so you've started your own business now.
Yeah.
Yep. Tell us what your business name is, because I'm going to put it all in the details so people can read it below and how to
Yes.
contact you. But how did you just decide to create your own business?
So I've called it Infinite Wirin Healing. So infinite obviously is endless,
Yep.
and Wirin is our Noongar word, our mob for spirit, energy. So how did I create this? So I worked for a NIA-funded organisation for 3 years, and that's where I became an instructor. And I realised that I really didn't want to be, you know, behind the screen anymore, because I was working online a lot. And even though I loved that stuff, you know, I loved facilitating. And because of my time in prison, I really wanted to get the AMFA into the Department of Justice here, and we started doing that. And I stepped into those prisons, and oh my goodness, like they're just some of the best workshops I've done to date, you know,
Yeah.
because they're a captive audience, and they're at their most wellest point, and they're so open and engaged and everything else. But I realized, like, mental health first aid, it just doesn't fit into that prison setting very well. It can be quite difficult, and they need tools. They need not just crisis stuff, they need real tools. So last year I sat down and I thought, I've got so much to offer with what I've been through. And not just that, because a lot of people talk about the war stories, but
Yeah.
how did I get well? How did I recover? How did I heal? So
Yeah.
that is what I decided to do. And then from that too, I've also been doing for the Aboriginal Health Council of WA over here, I've been doing a 3-hour workshop based around like AOD or substance use in the workplace. So that's sort of come from that too. So that's how it all came about.
Wow. And we'll have all the details so people can actually contact you and do help you with the promotion of that.
I would love that.
Yeah, we can do that. A question that I've got though is that we see in community a lot of lateral violence occurring. Have you experienced it? And for people that don't understand it, how does it make a person feel?
So this is a really big one for me because, you know, I really struggled with my Aboriginality. I mean, my grandmother over here in Noongar Budja, she's so well known. Like, she has done so much for mob here. You know, she's had such a voice and brought so much to light. And even with that connection and the big mob that I have and everything, like, I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't feel like I was working in this Aboriginal mental health space, and I kind of felt like, oh, you know, I didn't have that connection or that right to, you know, to kind of have my say about any of these issues. And now I'm in my train of thought, and my 45-year-old female hormone brain has completely forgotten what you asked me.
Yeah.
So to jog my memory, AJ, go.
Now I've forgotten what I asked you now. Which is okay. We'll come back to it.
Sorry.
Listening to you, what I love, and I think that what a lot of people would actually get out of it, or what you talk about, is that lived experience and the strategies that worked and didn't work for you.
Yes.
Because a lot of what our mob don't have is a lot of self-resilience.
Yep.
And that's why often they go from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis.
Yeah.
So being able to hear practical things that you did to actually help heal yourself,
Yep.
I think that's something that a lot of people would want to come and hear from you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. And while you were talking, I've just remembered what you asked me about, and that was lateral violence and how
Lateral
it's impacted
violence.
on me.
Yes.
So would you like me to finish?
Yes, we can finish that, respond that one.
Oh, this is the funniest podcast ever. Okay. So So in terms of lateral violence, yeah, what I was talking about was I found it really hard to connect and identify with my Aboriginality. I felt like I didn't have a right because I'm green-eyed and the colour of my skin and the way I talk and everything. And then I realised that actually came from all these stories that have been put in my head. You know, the lateral violence that occurs that is historical. You know, this whole idea of half caste, quadroon, you know, all this kind of business that comes from the past policy stuff. And here we are, you know, we want to grow, we want to have change, we want to heal, all these kind of things. And yet we're pointing fingers at each other saying, well, you're not black enough. You know, you weren't raised with mob. Who is your mob? All these kind of things. And it really just, it made it really hard for me to grow for quite some time. So in terms of lateral violence in that form, that stuff and that stigma around that was really hard for me to navigate. So it wasn't until I started to really step into some of these communities and just, especially the women, the Yorgas that I've worked with, and just be embraced with them, I just realized like, wow, you know, like you can't change your bloodline. You know, my mother's Aboriginal. Both of my maternal grandparents are Aboriginal, and that is part of me. You know, it doesn't matter about the color of my skin. You know, and another turning point around that too was I actually had lunch with Auntie Patricia Dudgeon, which is a big moment for me. I was like, wow, you know, and she was yarning about like stolen gen issues, and I kind of like in myself I thought, oh, I've got no right to speak on any of this, but then I walked away from it all and I was like, goodness, that's me and my brother. You know, some of that stuff is me and my brother, and that's how I have kind of felt, and, you know, that kind of thing too. So that just bridged that gap for me as well, you know, but the lateral violence, you know, the way that we're treating each other and what we contribute to it, really, we need to look as an individual at what we're doing around that stuff.
Yeah. So because you go into prisons as well, and I'm pretty sure you meet a lot of Aboriginal people on the way that don't know much about their own culture. When they say to you, hey, I want to know more about being Aboriginal, where do I start? Where would you recommend?
Oh, I mean, it depends on which community you're in. I was really lucky because one thing I always had, you know, like the Wodjula people that raised us, you know, they tried very hard to keep that separate. You know, there was never a name or anything, and to who we were, and we weren't taught anything at home. So, but one thing I had was my my grandmother, my Noongar grandmother, and I would see her on occasion. And then when I ended up leaving them, and I was only around 13 years old, she was that one consistent person through my life and still is, and she reconnected me in that sense. So I think, you know, like being able to just trace that back, go back to our communities and just be open and ask the questions, you know, respectfully. I think, you know, it's difficult because I guess it depends on what community you come from and what mob you come from, you know.
Yeah. If you could go back to any part of your life and make a change, where would you go back to, and what would you do differently?
That is a big question.
I never said the podcast was easy, but I did make people think.
Yes, that's true. Well, look, I think about two pivotal moments where, you know, something could have really changed for me. And the first one is I was only, I think, 12 and a half, and I had my first suicide attempt. And what happened with that was when I woke up in the hospital, my grandmother that raised us, she was at the foot of the bed and she said to me, oh, that was a very silly thing to do. You're lucky it's me here and not the police. And I was like sent home straight from the hospital. And the very next day, and we lived in Albany was a fairly small community back then. I was sent straight back to school, and it was first year high school because I'm born in December. So I was younger than everybody else too. So, and, you know, like the shame and everything that I felt, and that was a real turning point for me where I just really put the accelerator on. I was like, yeah, you think I'm crazy and you think I'm bad and all these things. Well, I'm going to show you, you know. And that younger me, that was a real opportunity for me to reach out to somebody and have that follow up from what had happened and go, I really need support. I really need help.
Yeah.
You know, so that would be the first one. And then I think the second one would be when I had my first child. You know,
Yeah.
I really cleaned myself up, and I really wanted so hard. I just wanted to be the mum that I didn't have, and all those kind of things. And then I just reconnected with the wrong people, and it was the methamphetamine that had just come into Perth at that time that really got me. And I
Yeah.
just, there was that opportunity there for me to reach out and say, oh, somebody step in, you know, like, somebody take the steering wheel, because I'm not steering in the right direction. So those are the 2 points in my life that I think there could have been
God, that
big.
had changed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I know you talk about addiction, and I know when we're looking at words in drug and alcohol, we look at drug use, drug abuse, drug addiction. When do you know that you've got a problem? And I know that people often use drugs, and I know that people often misuse drugs, and I know that people abuse drugs, but you can still be quite functional and not even realize you're unwell.
Yeah.
When did you realize that I'm not well?
Another tough question. You are making me think. When did I realize that? Oh, look, I think very early on, you know, like I was in a relationship with my oldest child's father from when I was about 13, and we were together for quite some time. And at the time, like, things would happen, you know, he'd want to go, like a young man does, he'd want to go out with his mates and things like that. And I would just have this crippling sense of doom and panic. And of course, I know now I had abandonment issues, you know, but
Yeah.
at the time, of course, I was so young, I didn't understand it. And but I would literally get to the point where I'd say to him, I won't be here when you get back, and I'd pull my hair out and I'd scream, and it would be so painful, you know, like emotionally, I could physically feel it. And I guess it was in those moments very early on when I thought to myself, like, there's something not right with me, like, this is not right. And then I would just wipe myself out, put myself in so many risky situations at a very young age. So it was pretty clear to me early on that there was something not right with me, but I didn't know what to do with any of that. See?
Yeah. And I think that's a really important thing that viewers should listen to, but I think families of people that you teach mental health first aid to, is that if you knew where the resources were, you could access them. But if you don't know where they are, you can't access them, and you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I think that's what I love about mental health first aid. It's at least getting people, the family, to understand what it might be like
Yes, what it might
for
look like.
for the person that's actually experiencing that event or that lived experience or that addiction. Because I don't think people really know what to say and what to do, because they don't actually understand what the person's actually going through.
Yes, so true. And look, the other point to that too, and I always say this to people in any facilitation, you know, like, if we are not role modeling and we're not focused on our own healing as parents, grandparents, whatever it is, then of course we're going to miss the signs because we're not doing it ourselves, you know. And at the time, everybody around me had their own trauma and hadn't done their own healing, you know. And my mum was running off guilt and just had this child back suddenly who had so many issues. And then very quickly, things didn't work out there. And so I was out the door on the streets, you know, and she didn't know what to do with that other than to just have the short fixes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if we had have had somebody who was more trauma informed, maybe, you know, or who had the lived experience to come in and say, hey, you know, let's start not just with the child, not just with mum, but together, everybody, and look at this stuff. I think that's very different. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you must hear the positive stories of people that you've actually helped already, even though through your lived experience. And you may not hear it straight away because you might be doing a workshop or talking, but I'm sure now, a year or so later, people are coming back to you and going, oh my God, I'm so glad you shared that, because this is how I've either helped somebody else or how I've seen this in myself.
Yeah, yeah, I've had a few experiences now that have been pretty big for me. And one of them was not that long ago, it was a few months ago, because I went into a community and I worked with yogas there, and I came away from it and I had one of these moments where everybody shared so much, and I thought to myself, like, is what I'm doing valid? Am I doing enough? Could I do more? You know, am I wasting my time doing this? Are people really getting it? And I believe in that universal energy, and I tell you what, it came through probably about 20 minutes later, because a young woman, she was only like 24. Now my oldest daughter, she's now 26, and she wrote me this beautiful message, and she said, because I'd seen her in the workshop and I just really connected with her, but she didn't say nothing, see?
Yeah.
And she'd written me this message, and she was like, my sister, it meant so much for me to be in your workshop, and I didn't want to leave. I could just sit and listen to you talk all day like that. And then she said to me how she'd been, caught in this cycle within her own family of drug use for quite some time, so, and how she wanted to change her life. And she and I keep in contact and all those kind of things now. So I've had a couple of those moments like that where I just go, but that one in particular was like, that's a sign.
Yeah.
That's a sign I'm on the right path. I'm doing the right thing, and just keep doing what you're doing, girl.
Yeah. And I think that's the rewards that we kind of get to remind us this is why we're doing it. This is why we're actually putting ourselves out there. I share a lot of my lived experience with participants too, and it can be draining and it can be quite hard. And I think I relate to what you've said as well, that sometimes you're sitting there going, is this worth it? Am I getting the message through? But then all of a sudden, I hear from elders when I'm walking down the street that stop me and go, oh, AJ, I'm so glad that you taught us how to have a conversation with somebody, because, they may have had someone that died previously in their family, and they saw it all happen and didn't know what to do. But
Yeah.
you know what, AJ? I saw my young nephew, he wasn't doing too well, and I asked him, how you been traveling? And he said, not too great. And I heard some of the invitations that sounded, oh, they didn't sound really good. And I asked him, are you having suicidal thoughts? And he said, yep. And they went, great. Now, not great, he was having suicidal thoughts, but great, I know I
Yeah.
can do something.
I feel
Because
confident to do
I
it.
feel confident to actually have those conversations, because
Yep.
I always think that, a lot of people are scared to ask the question around suicide, but I always try to break the belief that the question's not the scary part.
Yep.
It's the possible answer that's the
Yes.
scary part.
That's actually keeping you from wanting to ask. Yes.
Ask. And I think
Yep.
by breaking that, I've had so many people come up and say to me, I'm so glad you've taught me the question's not a scary thing, because
Yes.
that's what saves somebody. And
Yeah.
then you
Yeah.
know that the work that you do is being validated and recognized and loved.
Yes, yeah. And look, and when I do facilitate AMPFA now, I always on the second day in closing, we debrief, and I ask people, okay, feedback to me. Tell me one thing that you've learnt from the last 2 days, and you're always surprised. And a lot of times it's the AOD section, because I think the AOD section hits really differently. And look, the very sad thing about AMPFA is that I have got some sort of lived experience with every single topic.
Yeah.
In psychosis, like the whole lot of it. I've got so it's very easy for me to create a safe space where people can actually talk about their own stuff, because I've always got something to share if I need to get people talking. But I always like to ask people, look, what have you learned? And it surprises me what people are going through. I've had people, they've sat there and they've been so quiet, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, they just come out with the most profound thing, or something they've been going through in their life, and you just see the relief, on their faces, and it really is a very rewarding feeling. It's so healing. It's healed me so much.
Yeah. And I think that lived experience also makes the course real, if that makes sense. It's not just PowerPoints and videos and here's a case scenario that you work on.
Yeah.
You can actually share the sign, like I'm just thinking, you can share the same signs and symptoms that relate on the screen. You can share the same thought processes that people reflect on, but you can also talk a bit about what did work for you, what didn't work for you,
Yeah.
but not make it all about you, because it's not.
Yes, that's
it's,
right.
it's not your show. It's
That's
AMPA,
right.
right?
Yes, yeah, that's right. And that's the thing. There's a very fine line, and I think that, because look, I'll be honest, when I first started in this space, I loved all the accolades and the pats on the back and, oh, you're so amazing and wonderful. But I was still in a different part of my healing journey. And as I've evolved and as I've grown and I've stepped away from that identity and that ego stuff, I'm now in that space of, look, I'll share when I need to get people talking, to help them
Yeah.
feel safe. But I want everybody to have yarns, and sometimes if they ask me a question, I'll say, I'm not going to answer it. Yous are going to answer this question. So I'm opening the floor up, because, hey, when you're doing quite a few of these too consecutively, like, I don't want to be bored. I want to get something out of it. I want them to feel good and to feel like they've got something out of it too. So, like, you want them to be participants, because that's what they're meant to be, eh?
Yeah. I would like you to actually have a voice in this as well. It's not just me, one direction. There's a joint discussion, because we're having a yarn. A yarn involves more than one person.
Yeah. And I always say to people, like, with AMP, because it's the 2 days, like, you step into that space, and even as a facilitator, like, you still, the energy, I don't know who these people are and what to expect and all that kind of stuff. And then you get into your groove. And then by the end of the 2 days, everybody's like, net, like best buddies. And then I wake up on the 3rd day and I'm like, no, this is sad. I'm not going to see them.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that, AJ?
I would say yes too. And, I've been doing AMFA now for 18 years.
Wow.
So, and I've just delivered my 926th course. So people go, aren't you bored of it? I'm going, no, because every group's different. Every story that I hear from the different groups are completely different. Every mob I go into has their own issues that they want to discuss. And so I still have that little scared bit, like you said, to start off with, like, oh my God, who are they? Will they like me? Like all that validation kind of stuff to start off with. But
I'm going to forget something.
Yeah, but as soon as you get into that first unit around social emotional well-being, it kind of opens up people to actually realize that we're all vulnerable. We're all every one of those risk factors that we talk about, every Aboriginal person's experienced.
Yep.
And then it kind of makes it real. And that's when they start to open up and go, I've got my own mental health issues, or my family's got they got their issues. And then it becomes a real conversation. But it takes sometimes that first hour or hour and a half to get people to actually understand, one, how common mental illness is, but two, that the majority of Aboriginal people, we walk around with those risk factors on us 24/7, which makes us more prone, if that makes sense.
Yes, but it makes us pretty amazing too, because I had a Wodula fella in one of my workshops recently talking about, like, the being victims of past policies, and I said no, I said, I'm going to change that word right there. I said, we are survivors of past policies, and he said, yes, I agree with you. And I said, good, I'm glad. But it's such a good space to just like, that is what I love about AMPA so much, is because you've got so many topics, it just opens it up for a range of, like, really good yarns if you do it the right way.
Yeah. And I love the strength-based. I think you and I both talk a little sometimes about, using those strength-based words to change the narrative. Like, I also struggle a little bit, because even in, and look, I'm just going to say it, even the manual sort of talks about loss of culture, loss of language, loss of, and I actually try to actually go and say, well, colonization, because of colonization, we didn't lose this stuff. This stuff was taken from us or stolen from us. And sometimes people never had it to start off with.
Yeah.
Because for whatever family situation they were in. Loss also makes it sound like I'm bloody careless. Like where the effing hell did I just lose my culture? Whereas, why don't we actually label things
as they are?
As they actually are. That because of colonization, this stuff was stolen from us. This was taken away from us.
Yeah, but it makes people very uncomfortable.
it does, but it also, we need to put the truth telling in it.
Yeah.
And I find that strength-based conversations actually really help mob, but do make the gubbers here feel very very uncomfortable at times. But I think and I always remind the gubbers that to be a true ally is to actually make yourself feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, so true. Well, I had a Wodjila woman yesterday. She said to me, because the energy went very heavy when we talked around these kind of topics early in the day, and she said to me, you know what? She said, if people can live through this, then I think I can sit through a little bit of discomfort around yarning about it for 10 to 20 minutes. And I just applauded that, because I was like, that is a really good attitude to have. Thank you very much.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
And for people that didn't know what we were just talking about, we've been talking about the same thing, modulas and gubbers, but because we come on different sides of the country, we're actually referring to non-Indigenous people. Just for any listeners that are actually
Yeah,
wondering,
I'm aware.
what we're actually talking about. When I'm talking about gubbers, I'm talking about from our the eastern side of Australia.
Eastern side. Yep.
Yeah, you're on the western side of Australia. Well, what?
Yes.
Yeah, with these different
Noongar country, it's Wodjila here. Yep.
modular. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember coming to do training over there, and it was funny because I was talking about the gubbers, and a couple of people go, "What's a gubber?" Like
Yeah,
even the
yeah.
Aboriginal, "What's a gubber?" And I'm going, "Oh, I know where I am. I think you guys call it, and I mentioned it there. Oh, of
Yes,
course."
yeah, yeah.
And
Because
I
when
know,
you first did it, I thought the same thing, but I
yeah,
put it together really quick.
yeah, Northern Queensland often use migaloo as a
Yes, of course,
term.
I've heard that. Yes,
Yeah, the
yes,
migaloo, the white ghost people
yes,
that
yeah,
came on the
yeah,
ships, if that made
yes,
sense. Yeah.
yeah. And in the Kimberley region, it's Garia, I think,
Ah,
is the
yes,
word.
yeah,
Yes,
yes, I've heard
yeah,
that too.
yes,
And language is so important, and I think that um, even though we are from all parts of Australia, the one connection that we do have is that we do often respect the differences, or
yeah,
we try to respect the differences,
yes,
and follow cultural protocol. I know that I've done a lot of travel through Western Australia, and you've probably heard that I've been around Australia. Everywhere
sure,
I go, I always make contact with traditional custodians, and I'm always letting them know what I'm doing.
yeah,
And it's interesting because I don't say I get their permission, but I get their endorsement and their support.
yes. They're welcome. Yes,
And
you want to
and
be welcome.
they welcome me there, and they say, "Look, can you come a day earlier so I can take you out onto country and I can introduce you to country?" And
Yes,
it's not just where some people just go, "Oh, someone's just done a welcome ceremony." I've often been taken into the country area and shown the water and told to touch it and meet it
mm,
and feel it.
yeah,
And it's such a spiritual connection that it's interesting because when I go back to an area,
mm,
my heart starts to flutter,
you
going
can
like,
feel it.
I have been welcomed here, and not just through a welcome to country ceremony, but I've actually been welcomed by the country to be
Yes.
here, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah, no, totally. Look, I've lived here in Collie's only a small community just inland from Bunbury in the southwest of Western Australia. Now, I've lived here for 4 or 5 years. And because of my work, like, I was working from home, but also like the recovery space that I'm in, I don't socialize a lot, to be honest, because I don't drink or nothing like that either. Um, and so I hadn't done any work in the community. And then I had a Wodjila organisation reach out a couple of months ago and say, "Oh, we need to do some social and emotional wellbeing stuff here. Will you give us a hand?" And da da da. And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to." I said, "But you can't ask me to do that." Like I'm a black fella. You can't ask me to do that. The people in this community have to ask me to do that and have to welcome and invite me. So it's actually having that happen. And then I've done an amp for here with some of the mob here, and then I've gone out a couple of times with the elders. Oh, they took me out and we made tapping sticks, and we did soldering into the tapping sticks with the old fellas, and I had the best day. I absolutely loved it, and because I don't get to see my grandmother as much, it was
Yeah,
really healing for me. But I totally understand what you're saying, because now I just feel more integrated, more part of the community now that I'm doing this stuff. And yeah, it makes a big difference.
yeah. Hey, now cultural safety is a big word that gets thrown around.
Mm.
What makes you feel culturally safe when you go to a service?
That's a really hard one, because I've had a lot of different dynamics come into play when I have gone into services, like Aboriginal services, um, where, there's a lot of this, like,
Yeah,
you're not from here. you're lighter skinned or you're green eyed and things like that, and people question your motives and do you even belong here? And so I had a couple of those experiences, and I think we have to keep that in mind. Aboriginal is Aboriginal.
Yeah.
It says Aboriginal Medical Service if we're going into a service.
Yeah.
You have a duty of care and responsibility, no matter what your personal biases is or your experiences are, to welcome somebody in, because you could be the person that really makes a difference if that someone is coming in to ask for help. So I think around the cultural safety, it's just being open to whoever walks in that door, and being aware that you are that point, to connect them to other services.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense too. And I think the same thing happens when I go to a non-Indigenous service as well.
Hmm.
I want to be feel welcomed. I don't want to be tokenistically welcomed, but I want to feel, I think I'd like to feel that the person's showing me some sort of humility, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Oh, totally. And look, coming from somebody who, look, I'm not sure if everybody listening to this is going to know what the methadone program is, but methadone is an old school opioid that's used for other opioid addiction as a medical maintenance treatment. And there's so much stigma around it, and I also lived with hepatitis C for 17 and a half years. So both of those things combined, like for me going into any service,
Mm.
back in the day, they didn't have it on the computer. They
Ah,
had the file, and you'd have a big red sticker here in Western Australia, and you were basically a registered addict. And you'd go into a service, and they'd be too lovely and welcoming and all this kind of business, and bending over backwards for you. And then they'd open that file up, and they'd see that big red sticker, and 9 times out of 10, AJ, like I would just see their whole face, they'd stiffen, and they'd be a completely different person. So, you
yeah,
know, around my lived experience, I've had to deal with a lot of that bias
yeah.
for a long time. And I do like to speak about this stuff, particularly when I work with service providers. You got to leave that stuff at the door.
Yeah. And I don't think service providers know some of this stuff until you throw it back in their face
Hmm.
in a way of, like, I talk about cases with like, I've been through the court system through child protection myself. So things, not for my kids, for me, myself as a kid. But
Yeah.
I remember having to try to explain to people when things were substantiated and people had been charged, it's no longer an alleged issue anymore,
Yeah.
because some case managers will be writing alleged abuse or alleged incident,
Yeah.
and it's like, no, it makes me feel I'm not believed and not
Yes.
trusted,
Yes.
because in the case the person's been charged, they've been convicted, they've it's a real lived experience that I went through that's now been proven, but the
Yeah.
workers' comments make it like I'm not believed and listened to, and because it's
Yes.
gone back to being alleged again.
Yeah. And you're not validated in your experience,
Yeah,
Yeah. And there's a lot of that. Um, and it's always difficult, in these kind of situations as well. Like when we speak about, like I like to consider myself a truth teller, like, and maybe it does make some people uncomfortable, but I speak truth, because if we don't bring light to this stuff, it's never going to change. Like I put up a post recently about hepatitis C and living with that, and I'm going to say, and even the wording, hep C, hep C, hep C, people, I guarantee they're thinking, oh, dirty and all this kind of stuff.
yeah,
There's a lot of people that still think like that,
yeah,
and and it's not even about pointing fingers. People are just misinformed and uneducated. And I think it helps to have somebody who's on the other side of it, that looks healthy, that can show the pictures, tell the story, and say, look, that is somebody's mum, someone's dad, someone's brother, someone's sister, daughter, all these kind of things, and just putting a face to it and
yeah,
being really open and talking about stuff that people don't want to talk about. I love that stuff.
yeah, yeah. I love it too. I think it's breaking the taboo topics that people don't want to actually go to,
Yep.
and then actually having that, opening them up, and it's amazing because when you do open them up, people want to talk about them.
They do. They have these. Oh, look, I had one yoga in our workshop this week, and she was an older Wodjila lady, and she was asking some really deep questions around like addiction, and especially IV drug use, and because she just didn't know. But I saluted her because I was like, I love that you asking these questions from your heart, and other people were like, you can't say that, you can't ask that, and but I think, yeah, bravo, just do it. You got a question, ask it.
Yeah. Now, what things ground you? Like, because you talk about a lot of lived experience, right? And I
Yep.
do that too. But what things do you love doing that help ground you?
Okay, what do? I do a lot of like meditation practices, sitting in the stillness. I mean, when you are listening to to yarning a lot with
Yeah.
people, like as we do, I need to come away from that, and music is my thing too. Um, I have a practice now where I do a lot of writing, and I only write positive stuff to myself. Like I might write myself a love letter, and I do the high five habit, and I demonstrate this in my workshops, not necessarily AMPFA, but in my other workshops. I'm like, do 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 do, yeah, yeah, girl, yeah, in the yes, yeah, like in the mirror, all this kind of stuff. But the number one thing for me too, aside from the meditation, the Reiki, and all those kind of things, is I actually record my voice. So I record my voice onto my phone, and the first thing I do when I wake up, because when we wake up, when we go to sleep, is the best time for rewiring our brains, right?
Yep.
And on these recordings, I have, things like, I love you, Candice. I love you so much. And I set myself little goals, and I talk to myself as if it's already happening, and I'm like, at the moment, I have one that says, I am the most successful and highly paid social and emotional wellbeing facilitator in the world. So I'm coming for you, AJ. But I
Love
have
it.
all these loving messages for myself,
Yeah.
and and I change them every couple of months. I change them, but that's
Yeah.
how I wake up in the morning. I put that straight in my ear. Or if I'm struggling with the negative thinking, or I'm too much in here going on, I just put that voice, my own voice, in my ears, and that soothes me. And I listen to it for sometimes maybe 30 to 60 minutes if
Yeah.
my family thinks I'm crazy. But
What
that's, yeah,
they didn't think you were crazy before, but they think you're crazy now.
I was crazier.
Yeah. Now, I've got just a couple of final questions, and that is one question I've got is that where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Okay. Oh, what are you asking me these tough questions for?
When you come
um,
back for the second podcast, I make it a lot easier.
okay. Oh, thank you. Okay. So where do I see myself in 5 years' time? Look, honestly, I'm happy doing what I'm doing right now, but of course, I would love to be doing it to a bigger audience. Just being in a space where I can just share my truth and my healing, and seeing, that come to fruition with other people, like planting that seed and for them to start doing that for themselves. And in another 5 years, I would love to have other lived experience people behind me doing what I'm doing. So like a little army of us, like going out there and then assisting others in the same field. And in another 5 years, I think I'd like to have some grandchildren too.
Oh, that might be a bit beyond you, but you can do a lot of encouragement.
Yes, yes, I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah. And I know I'm watching the time, and my last question is, what would you like people to walk away with from our yarn this afternoon?
I think I'd like to inspire people to be brave, you know, be accepting and loving of each other regardless, and just be open to the fact that everybody has a story. When we interact with each other and we communicate with each other, just keep in mind that it's not hard to be kind. And I know that sounds so cliche, but if we could just be have more gratitude for our little blessings, be kinder to each other and more understanding, but also be courageous and speak our truth, yeah.
I
And if
love
I can
that.
do this stuff, anybody can do it. I'm not a unicorn. I say to people, I don't fart rainbows. There's none of this business going on here. Like if I can do this, anybody can do it too.
Yeah. Look, I want to say thank you for hanging with me this afternoon. I know that I'm pretty sure the listeners will have got a lot out of what you've actually said. And thank you for sharing your lived experience with us. And I'm going to make sure that you're back in a couple of episodes' time for a part two of this as well.
Okay.
Now, guys, I want to say thank you for Candice for joining us today. And I'll see you guys in the next podcast. And thanks heaps.